Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to Oblong Online. I'm Helen Sosalski. I'm the Events Director for Oblong Books here in the Hudson Valley. And tonight we're thrilled to host a panel of 4 extraordinary writers in conversation about the natural world and the role it plays in their work and what it means to reflect, hope, and heal through interactions with creatures other than ourselves. Sy Montgomery, Eileen Garvin, Jackie Polzin, and Florence Williams. Welcome, all of you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Great to be here.
Great to see you. We encourage you to share where you're tuning in from in the chat, please, because we have people coming from all over the country, and it's always exciting to hear where you're from. And if you have a question for our guests, please enter it in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of your screen, or you can also put it in the chat, and we'll address those at the end of the program. Our host, Florence Williams, is a contributing editor at Outside Magazine and a freelance writer for publications including the New York Times and National Geographic. Her book, The Nature Fix: Why Nature Makes Us Happier, Healthier, and More Creative, is available in paperback. Sy Montgomery is a naturalist, documentary scriptwriter, and author of 31 acclaimed books of nonfiction, including the National Book Award finalist, The Soul of an Octopus, the New York Times best-selling memoir, The Good, Good Pig, and most recently, The Hummingbird's Gift. And Sy lives in New Hampshire with her husband and Thurber, their border collie, who may put in an appearance. He's just off camera at the moment. Eileen Garvin is a beekeeper and writer living in Hood River, Oregon. Her debut novel, The Music of Bees, was a Good Morning America buzz pick, a Good Housekeeping book club pick, and an Indie Next pick, and more. Jackie Polzin's debut novel, Brood, was a New York Times Editor's Choice and recently longlisted for the 2021 Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. Congratulations on that, Jackie. And she lives in St. Paul, Minnesota with her husband, 2 children, and a small dog. All our authors' books are available to purchase at oblongbooks.com or via the Buy the Book button at the bottom of your screen. I've also posted in the chat links, if you prefer to listen to your books, links to purchase the books in audio form on Libro FM. And I will also mention that all of these books are fantastic. You should buy all of them, and they make great holiday gifts. And with that, Florence, I'm going to hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's such a delight to be here with all of you. I feel like we're a like-minded crew. I think it would be so fun to sort of be on a ship with all of you, sort of a Noah's Ark where we could all bring our creatures. And I just picture us running around. I don't know if the hummingbirds would get along with the chickens. And I also have a feeling that many of us are sort of introverts, so we probably wouldn't see each other very much on the boat. So maybe Zoom is just about right for us. What I want to do, I have questions for you all, but I'm hoping also that feel free to jump in with questions of your own for each other. And I really envision this as more a conversation. And if it gets sort of raucous and unpredictable, I think that would be fine. And of course, I also want to leave time for questions from our audience. And I guess as to that, go ahead and you can put some questions in the chat, and I will try to keep tabs of those and come back to them. But there are obviously so many themes that these books share. Of course, there's healing in nature. That is something that I proselytize all the time. So I'm particularly fixated on that. But I'm also really drawn to these themes of grief and loss, which is something that I am also increasingly writing more about. And I think it's very fresh on everyone's minds, these feelings of collective loss that we are all going through, that I think make these books right now kind of particularly timely and full of wisdom. So, I guess there are these losses in the characters' lives, sort of personal grief, but there's also this grief about nature that certainly comes through in all of these books. And I wanted to focus first on the personal grief and then sort of move into the natural world. And so I'm interested in why each of you, has focused on the particular animal that you focused on as the sort of I guess, in a way, guide to healing for your characters. And maybe, Eileen, I'll start with you. You know, what do the bees have to offer? Why bees?
Well, I started with bees for a very practical reason, actually, which was because I was beekeeping at the time that I was writing the story. And I've always loved novels where characters are doing some kind of work together. I am a big fan of your kind of drawing room drama where nothing happens for, 3.5 hours on screen or whatever, and it's all internal. But I can't seem to write that way. And I love when characters get to know each other, just like in real life, when you're doing some sort of labor with people. So I was beekeeping at the time, and then it occurred to me that I could employ that pastime as a way for the three people in the story to get to know each other and to learn things about themselves and each other as they were learning about beekeeping. The more I learn, the more interesting it is too. So it was sort of an ever opening topic as well.
Okay, great. And Jackie, what about these chickens?
The chickens. So it's, first I should say about Eileen's book, I loved the way that these three, so as different characters come in contact with the bees, all having their own, like they're already pre-existing notions of what bees are capable of or what they offer, or, having these notions of bees, and then those notions change over the course of interacting with them or being exposed to them. And it was really fun to see multiple characters you get so many different perspectives on how raising a bee or caring for bees, or even just like being in the proximity of a bee might affect different people. So I think there was a sort of multi-fold advantage to experiencing the bees that way through so many different screens or filters or something. But yeah, the chickens largely, very similarly, I was raising chickens at the point I started writing the book. And reading all of this work has really brought to mind this little equation that I think I first heard from George Saunders, which was attention plus time equals love. And it's this idea of just like, this act of caring or attention yields this result over time. And I just see that so fluidly in all of this work. And that was probably at the heart of the exploration for me, was like, what does attention paid over time, can it yield this for someone in grief? Can it like provide this natural release or just comfort and pathway kind of out of grief? So yeah, I think that was probably like, I was able then to, in my work, just like give a lot of attention to these birds, which is nice for writing, getting all those like visceral details. But hey, if you can fall in love with some chickens in the meantime. And I think obviously I already had deep feelings for these chickens, but I just love that exploration of like the human capacity to cross that boundary into caring for something other than ourselves.
And yeah, Jackie, I love how kind of unsentimental your narrator is. You talk about love. There's obviously a lot of love she feels for these creatures that she's caring for. And yet she's so sort of hardened, kind of Midwestern person. I just want to commend you for that. I just really appreciated kind of the subtle ways you got at that equation. And
thank you. I think there was a little device I sometimes used, which was simply don't use the word love. Like see if you can, like, within that, like, yeah, I think that helped me.
Well, they say show, don't tell, and that's what you did.
And she's so unsentimental towards her husband too.
The withholding of the love from the chickens too. Well, no, you're withholding saying love, but I was thinking of when you talked about Gam Gam, and the way, I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but when something happens to Gam Gam, and then Percy says, Gam Gam was my favorite. And the narrator says, oh, I didn't have a favorite, but then tells the reader, Gam Gam was my favorite. So the narrator clearly does love the chickens, but just that withholding of demonstrating it made it even more powerful for me as a reader.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think about that with Sy's work all the time of like, how does she guard herself against these, like falling in love over and over and over again with these animals? How do you protect yourself? Because I think that protective instinct is always there a little bit. Not with Sy, because I think Sy is like part chicken, part octopus, part pony, part dog.
Yeah, I think at one point, Sy even says she feels like, in birdology, she says she feels like an honorary chicken.
That would be an honor indeed. Yes. I mean, yes. I let myself fall in love, and that's one of my tools, because I fling my whole, that was not me that made that sound. He just had a big bowl of food. Anyway, that's one of my tools of research. You know, you use your intellect, you use your interviews and your education, but you also use your intuition and your emotion. And I think with every animal that I've written about, I've opened myself up to be in love with them and using that love as a tool of inquiry. And I learned that from Jane Goodall, you know, who was the woman who changed ethology, the study of animal behavior, more than anyone else. And when she went into the field in 1960, the first thing she did was all the stuff you're not supposed to do in science. She named the animals, she became friends with them, and she let them lead her into their world. And all of that was stuff you weren't supposed to do, but because she let them do it.
I want to come back.
Do it. She saw stuff no one ever saw before.
I definitely want to come back to the sort of Jane Goodall model. But first, I want to hear about why hummingbirds, because, you know, I know you pulled that chapter out of birdology, made it its own really beautiful, kind of perfect book. And what is it about the hummingbirds that spoke to you in that way as this kind of emblematic cornerstone for this book?
Well, originally birdology was supposed to be called Birds Are Made of Air. And that's the characteristic of all birds that hummingbirds really have on display. I mean, all birds are hollow, their bones are hollow, they're full of air sacs. You know, their feathers, most birds, their feathers weigh more than their skeletons. And their feathers are, you know, feathers and very light. But the reason I think the book on hummingbirds as a separate book speaks to people is they're resurrection birds. They're literally called resurrection birds in parts of South America. When the Spanish explorers first came, they believed that nothing so beautiful and pristine, it had to be something that was made new every single day. And right now, you know, as the pandemic drags on, we are so hungry for that resurrection. And the book is the story of how Brenda Sherburne LaBelle, my dear friend who's a bird rehabilitator, let me in on saving these two orphan baby hummingbirds, just, you know, the most vulnerable creatures that you could imagine, and saved their lives. So once again, resurrection, and that's something that I think we want right now.
I think that term is so perfect for the metaphor, and that is one of the reasons nature is so powerful and healing for us, is because there are so many metaphors that we see, and these particular creatures that you've all highlighted are just full of them. And I think that it gets to the core of what's appealing for us personally, about connecting with these animals. In some ways, they're role models, right, for us and for our world. And I wanted to read this this quick sentence from Jackie, who says of her chickens, or her narrator's chickens. Chickens are poorly equipped for survival, but because a chicken has no memory of what came before and no thought of what comes after, winter is no psychic shock. And there's so many passages like that where Jackie, you talk about how the chickens live in the moment. And of course, for a character who's dealing with a terrible, grief-stricken past event, that living in the moment is obviously a really powerful message. So Jackie, I wonder if you can talk about that. I mean, was there, it's so Zen, and are you interested in Zen Buddhism, and is living in the present moment one of the key lessons of this kind of caretaking?
So I think I have maybe 3 things to say about it. First is that Sy and I would probably disagree on the level to which chickens have a capacity for memory. But certainly within this narrative, it's very useful for this narrator to think in these terms that feels like a mode in which she can be free of pain or free of suffering. And yes, I'm very interested in Zen Buddhism. I'm just fascinated by it. I think as a concept, I aspire to meditate, let's put it that way. And yeah, I think that I really do think that this living in the moment is a way in which we can notice fully the world around us, and certainly get out of our heads, whatever our heads hold for us there in the like past or future. So yeah, for this narrator, absolutely, I think the moments that give her the greatest relief are in the moment, are like full in the moment, and that was deliberate, and that's something I'm very curious about. and for me personally, this idea of nature, which in this book it's kind of an urban version of nature, which I know in your work, Frances, is like one of the great quandaries, is like, to what extent can we have this in our small lives without traveling large distances for it, or even heading to the woods. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that. I would like to think it's possible to find this small piece of nature and just find relief in it.
And Eileen, for you also, for your character, in some ways, Alice Holtzman, grieving widow, she has to learn how to become like her bees, right? She kind of becomes a queen bee, where she develops this hive, and she's not necessarily ruling the hive, but she's kind of the center of it. And how conscious were you of kind of the metaphors of the queen bee in relation to Alice?
I really wasn't conscious of it until sort of the end, when I was putting kind of the chapter headings and playing with titles and things like that. Alice really intrigued me as I followed her and figured out who she was going to be, because she says from the very beginning that she's a loner, she doesn't want people around, she does things her own way, and then lo and behold, she ends up being kind of the den mother to these 2 lost boys, and clearly becomes like a sort of a mother to them, a mother figure in the queen bee. So I I'm more aware of it now as I'm thinking of it. And the metaphor really extends itself, because Alice approaches, she's a stalwart sort of Hood River agricultural family. And she first approached the bees from that mindset, really. It's all about the orchards and farming. And she's really grown to love these creatures, but she learns things about them that she never would have dreamed of through these other people that come into her farm. Jake has some really unique talents for understanding bees and working with bees, and Harry's terrified of them, but he has this whole other skill set about how to build their hives. So she learns from them. And I was thinking about this today because I was just in my hives this afternoon and kind of checking in on everybody. And the queen is can't do anything for herself. She can't feed herself. She can't clean herself. All she does is lay eggs all day long for the season in the dark, and she only leaves a hive usually just once in her lifetime to mate, and then she comes back. So in a way, it extends the metaphor even more there, where Alice is getting something from the others in the same way that the queen can't operate without her workers and drones.
And I love, you know, one of your other characters, Jake, you know, who's learning about bees. And at some point he reads all these books about bees, and he reads this very old text that encourages people to dress appropriately and cleanly and you know, bathe before interacting with the hives. And in fact, he shaves his head, which is a really big deal for this character, sort of a sign of his maturity. So I guess this would be a question for you, Eileen, and also Sy, because the caretakers of the hummingbirds have to be incredibly diligent. They can't be casual. If you're nursing, you know, at this baby who has to be fed every 20 minutes. And I'm wondering what the metaphors are there. Like, do we need to approach nature with a certain kind of respect and reverence in order to attain these benefits?
Oh yeah, I absolutely. And one of the things I loved about being able to help save these hummingbirds was that it was so demanding. You had to give your life over to it. There was absolutely nothing else you could really do. You could not even have a long conversation with a friend, because as you said, every 20 minutes, these two birds were hungry, and you had to feed them exactly the right amount. If you fed them too little, they would starve. If you fed them too much, they would literally pop. You had to be exacting. And it was like a ritual doing this. And at first I thought, you know, could I do this? You know, could I let everything else go and sacrifice it all to these baby hummingbirds? And instantly it was clear that there's nothing better to do with your time. And it wasn't like I'd put my life aside. I had found it. This was life. It was consuming, and it was incandescent to be able to do this. It was purifying. It was such a blessing to be able to take part in this resurrection. It was one of the most valuable things I've ever done.
It's incredibly moving. Eileen, what are your thoughts about that question?
Paying attention, definitely. I think that in beekeeping, as in the story, there's a scene in which Alice is distracted. Actually, there's more than one scene where Alice is distracted and bad things happen. And I know from my own time in keeping bees that I have to be very intentional and methodical. And I do my own little rituals to just really remind myself what I'm doing. I'm not just rushing outside to water the lawn or something. I have to be very thoughtful about, okay, I'm approaching the hive, looking at the bees. How do the bees seem before I do anything? I have to maybe change my agenda depending on what they've got going on. If they are particularly upset because they were being harassed, then I don't go into the hive. Or if I go in and I discover a problem, I have to change my mindset. So it really is slowing down, paying attention to the moment, and using all your senses as well. When you go to check on your hive, before you do anything, you want to look at what's happening. You want to smell, see if everything smells like they should, normal, that smell sweet like honey, and listen. The bees have a particular tone they make when everything's copacetic and they're pretty happy. So it really does make you slow down and pay attention, which is something I love being outside, and I'm lucky to live in a very beautiful area. But I noticed that, especially the last 18 months, really the slowing down helps and makes me feel more present and happier and more aware.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because all your books are so rich with sensory details. The smells, they're very set in place, and I get a very strong sense of that. And I think you're right. There's tremendous comfort in these just right next door, right where you are. An ability to find awe where you are is so important. But there's also this kind of background sense of loss, that these stories are set against, and I mean ecosystem loss. It's impossible to have this kind of conversation, I think, where we are right now at this moment in the Anthropocene, without nodding to that. And Sy, you have this really kind of alarming passage in your book, and I'll just read a few sentences of it. Bumblebee populations are crashing. You are 50% less likely to see a bumblebee than you were in 1974. Butterfly populations have decreased, according to one estimate, by 33% in the last 20 years. 3 billion birds have disappeared from North American skies in the past 5 decades. And then hummingbirds projected to lose 90% of their small breeding range, 4 species of them, due to climate disruption by 2080. So those are very disturbing statistics. Certainly we've seen a lot of the direct effects of climate change this summer. And I'm curious about how the three of you, grapple with that kind of reality. Do you have a philosophy that really seeds your own personal life choices? And how much do small actions help?
I mean, I want to believe that small actions help. And I think, my daughter is 4 and she goes to a nature preschool, which is a lot like the kindergartens in Germany. And we're just lucky it exists within, close to our home, and we can do that. And it was a dream of mine because I read an article in the Times about those German kindergartens. And I thought, oh my God, with the jackknives, they're all out there with their knives. And I thought that is fantastic. And then we moved to West St. Paul, and there was a nature preschool actually just down the road from us. And that to me has given me so much hope to see these kids finding nature every single day. They'll see an owl in the tree, and they'll see like the owl drop the droppings of the pellets come down, and then they'll go like pick it apart, and just amazing things that they get to do, which even by association, although I do love to go to the same trails and hike them and spend time there, even by association to hear those stories, it's like a vicarious way of getting nature. And yeah, and I think it serves as a model for how we interact with our kids after that, where, I think it really does serve, for me, it's like I can try to understand what they're doing and just like latch onto it a little bit, and apply it to my own life, apply it to their lives. Yeah, I hope that small things do help. I see a cumulative effect of small things in my own life that make me feel hopeful. And when I read the work of these writers, I feel hopeful. I will say that just like the act of caring of noticing these animals and capturing their essence and sending it out into the world, that to me is very powerful.
Yeah, it's a devotion. And I feel, how do you not despair? Because sometimes it feels like it would be so easy to completely despair. But there's so many things we can do in our daily lives. And a lot of them are even things that you don't do. You don't have to spend every single minute doing some difficult, uncomfortable thing. There's so many different options. I mean, I've been a vegetarian for, gosh, like almost 40 years. And, you know, you have an option to drive a hybrid car. You have an option to take your bike instead of your car to go somewhere. When you vote, you have an option to do something for the environment. And like what you were saying about your daughter, and you know, children aren't the leaders of tomorrow; they're the leaders of today. That's one reason that I also write for kids. One of my best friends is 13 years old, and just because they're young doesn't mean that they're not as smart as us. They may be way smarter than us, and they have so much to teach us. And by doing something as many times as you can every day, it alleviates that compassion fatigue. And that's one reason why it was just so wonderful to be helping raise these orphan baby hummingbirds. And lately, one of the things that I've been doing for the past couple of years is I've been volunteering at a turtle hospital, helping turtles. And, you know, people may say, like, God, you know, the Amazon's on fire, for goodness sakes. The climate's going to hell, and you're worrying about somebody's broken shell. But you're still putting this broken world back together. And every chance we have to do that is a chance to restore not just the world, but restore ourselves.
That's really inspiring, Sy. I really didn't want to answer this question because I can't really articulate. I wish that I had some grounding philosophy. I guess I'm sort of grasping for it these days. I find it by reading books like yours, the three of you. Find hope there, and back way in the 19th century with the first naturalists that were writing about the value of the natural world. And I try to, I think it is very important not to give into despair. It's sort of too easy. And I think I'm right now just thinking day to day. So we have the pandemic, and you know, I live in this wonderful, the National Scenic Area. When it all closed down last year, I thought, okay, I'm going to be all right. I can still get outside. That's all I need to do. But then they closed every state park and every national forest because people weren't being safe. And so then I might as well have been in an apartment in Manhattan. And so when every time it's opened up again, I've been trying to pay attention to how happy that makes me, being kind to other people I see on the trail. In my own life with working with the bees, and of course having a book about bees, I have ample opportunities to just bring up bees when I'm talking to people. And you know, honeybees they're not native. They're not one of the 500 Oregon pollinators, native pollinators that's suffering right now either. But it's an easy entry point for anybody to understand. Everyone likes honey. Everyone's seen to be at the park, so you can start a conversation there and get other people thinking about what's happening around them. And if I can do those small things, I feel that makes me feel hopeful, and hopefully, and then that can grow upon itself.
And you show too, I mean, one of the reasons that I love the book is that you show how we all have gifts that we can bring to healing this world. And I think it's such a wonderful book for the disability rights community. And boy, you got Jake right. I have a number of friends who use wheelchairs, and no, I mean, you got it right. For everybody, it's different, but it read completely true. And you know, here's 2-3 broken characters who were able to do something wonderful for the world thanks to bees, and were able to, you know, save their community from being poisoned by this horrible money grubbing company. Anyway, it's
thanks. It was easy to make the pesticide
so
company. Thanks, Sy. Yeah, but I think, you know, Alice, Jake, and Harry each have a problem, and they have to find the solution within themselves, and they find it by leaning on each other. And I think that happens to all of us, and it's not just one time. It's not like you know, you have the one big catastrophe in your life, as we've all seen in the last 18 months. There's some you never expect what's going to happen. And so if they can find the strength within themselves by leaning on each other, and I hope that's what that provides some inspiration to other people.
It does.
Florence, do you think small actions matter?
Okay, so this is a really something I've been thinking a lot about. I think they matter a lot for our own personal psyche. But I had this profound conversation with a psychologist not long ago, and he said, you know, there's individual psychology, which is important, but a big component of that is not just our own emotional state. It's actually also having some confidence in sort of the social systems around us. And he calls that, I think, social optimism. That is what I am struggling with right now. You know, watching the divisions created by the pandemic, during the pandemic, you know, in the wake of the Trump administration, and just the electoral politics we have that are so divisive. So, you know, Eileen, I mean, reading your book was this wonderful sort of balm where where democracy sort of worked, right? I mean, there were kind of good guys and there were bad guys. The bad guys lost. They took on Supergrow. And, you know, the community was saved from this corporation, saved from poison. The media tweeted, you know, this confrontation towards the end, and the right things happened. And I almost felt like I was reading about a different world. And I think, I mean, you must have written that, of course, before the pandemic. I'm wondering if you feel like you could have written those scenes again, knowing what we've seen now about the divisions in rural America.
Oh, I don't know. It would be very different. I was revising the book during the summer of 2020 when there was so much social unrest, and so all of a sudden my cute little hometown riot just felt like, you know, a party. So I don't know. I do think, honestly, living in a small town, I live in Hood River, which is, you know, the book is set there, but it's a very fictionalized version of Hood River. But it is one of the nice things about living in a small town is you can have an impact, because you can go to city council and stand up and have your say, and you can talk to the mayor, and you can, you know, it's not, things don't happen overnight, but it does feel less debilitating than trying to look at the whole federal system. So I don't know what that would be like to right now, but it would. It certainly feels a little bit more manageable because it's a small stage.
Well, and another thing we should all remember is that our actions, our good works, continue to walk in the world. We may not live to see, or we may not be able to see the change that we want. But maybe we influence someone else who will go on to win that battle off stage. We may not, it may happen. It may even happen while we're alive, but we may not know. We may not know. And I think that there's also real value in making our lives like a prayer. You send off your prayers, and you don't always get a big tablet with instructions right away. But there's value to that prayer. And I think that prayers are answered one way or another. And our lives are just such a small piece of larger time. I have to keep reminding myself, I want to save the polar bears now. But our books, our words, our good works, all of us, and I say all of us to everyone listening here, that continues to walk in the world. And we just have to trust that there will be an effect, even if we don't get to see it.
Thank you, Sy. Okay, you're giving me some social optimism. Thank you.
Me too.
You know, I think some of our audience may not be ready to run out and you know, raise chickens or save hummingbirds or become a beekeeper. And I wonder if there are sort of baby steps that you all recommend for those of us who don't really have these skills. Are there ways we can find skills? I know, Sy, you mentioned working in a turtle rehab facility. I think that's a great suggestion. And I'd just be curious to hear other suggestions that you have for people who want to connect more to wildlife.
Oh gosh, well, stop vacuuming your house and you'll be able to watch fantastic spiders.
I don't know if I'm ready for that.
We have such great spider action right in our room. It's fantastic. And they'll eat your mosquitoes and you'll be able to see it. No, I mean, gosh, there's just, if you have pigeons, oh my God, pigeons are like the best birds to watch because they mate year round. They do all kinds of behaviors right in front of you. They're fantastic to watch. Squirrels, you can get to know individual squirrels. And no matter where you live, there's probably some squirrels. There's, you know, set up a bird feeder, and there's so much unknown out there too. Do you know the people haven't even cataloged all the earthworms that we have in North America? They don't even know about earthworms. This is such a common thing. It's literally under our feet. So there's lots and lots of great opportunities to watch animals. You don't necessarily have to raise bees or chickens or hummingbirds. They're all around us.
You know, I was thinking of something that when Sy was talking, she said, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as just not doing what you were going to do next. Like opting out of this sort of compulsory doing of stuff and buying of stuff and all of that. And I had a kind of, transformative experience when a few years ago, Ann Patchett wrote about a year of no shopping. And I thought, I'm going to do a year of no shopping. And I mean, you know, you set up your own parameters. She bought books, I bought books. You buy your groceries, but it's very much, and then actually I failed to do it. On the whole, I like broke down partway through. But even going many months of just like, I'm not buying anything that isn't essential, gave me so much time, changed my noticing about those impulses. It was so fascinating to just have to sit with those impulses and sort of interrogate them. Like, why though? Why does this feeling keep coming back to me? And I have to say that the outcome of it was strangely this like freeing. I mean, it almost directly sent me into nature of this ability to just like let everything else go, to just be free of it. And I thought it was so powerful. And I guess that's the only reason I bring it up. I thought it was like strangely powerful to attempt to do that.
It's so great. And you know what? I mean, buying stuff is one of the ways we horribly pollute the world, even clothes. You know, we don't realize our clothes are all made of plastic now.
Yeah.
And I never buy clothes. I mean, this great shirt, my friend Ashley gave it to me. My socks, there's just stuff floating around in the world. You don't even have to buy new stuff. You just pick up someone else's stuff and it's like already shrunk to your size and it's great. Good for you. What a great suggestion.
It's also time consuming. Shopping is time consuming and taking care of stuff you bought is time consuming. So I think that if you stop doing that or just do it less, then you have more time to, you know, watch your spiders or whatever it might be. And as far as Florence, to answer your question about how people can get started, bees are fabulous as a thing to watch. And what's surprising is when you start noticing what you didn't notice before. So any park you go to, especially in the springtime, there's over 20,000 species of bees in the world. And in Oregon, we have, I think, 500. I wrote this down. I'm cheating. 500. I can't remember how many bumblebees. I think it was 30 of those. But in any case, once you start looking, oh, that's a honeybee. now I know what that looks like. What's that thing over there? And it's pretty fantastic. So if you have any kind of park system, you know, when the flowers are showing off in the springtime, just taking a slow walk and looking is pretty eye-opening.
I wanted to mention too an idea, and Sy, you inspired this. My book club, before every winter holiday, we have a clothing swap where we don't talk about books, but we bring in clothes we don't want, and then there's this sort of mad dash, you know, to get the good stuff, and you feel like you have something new, and it's really fun.
And
so I think
someone who likes stuff too, you know. I mean, I love it that I not only have this pretty thing, but that it belonged to my friend.
I like this idea of synergy between books and clothing, so we can work on that. I have another question for you, but I also want to just remind our audience to please, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And I did want to come back to Jane Goodall. Sy, thanks for bringing that up. You know, all of the characters in these books, and Sy and yours too, they're all post-reproductive women. And I love that. I love that they are women of a certain age who are conveying these messages of recovery and resilience. I wanted to ask you to what extent yours is sort of a feminist project. Why is it that these women have something to teach the rest of us? And the feminist project, I guess, would relate to the fact that often women of this age are not, you know, sort of seen and listened to, and yet they do have the wisdom. So I wonder if you can talk about that.
Which, are we all talking about it?
Well, Sy, let's start with you, since you mentioned being inspired by Jane Goodall.
Okay, well, I mean, post-reproductive females in a lot of animal societies are extremely important. In killer whales, which is a terrible name for an orca, but if your grandmother is alive, your chance of being alive is way enhanced, whether you're a male or a female whale. And in both bonobos and chimpanzees, grandmother chimps have enormous power. For the longest time, everyone focused on the alpha male as having all the power, but it's not true. The grandmothers have a lot of power. And of course, in elephants, it's the matriarch who leads everyone and is the undisputed, you know, head of the whole shebang. So I've been thinking about wisdom a lot lately because, I mean, being around turtles, I think helps you do that. They live a long, long time. They know stuff. They remember stuff. I don't know how much they take out those memories and look at them the way that we do. They probably don't, but they remember, you know, this pond, it dried up 50 years ago. So I'm going to go to that pond. They know that stuff. So I think we ignore grandmothers and their wisdom at our peril, and perhaps we listen to it more than we know. And Jane Goodall right now, I think, is the single most recognized, as well as the single most celebrated scientist in the world. So that's moved the needle quite a bit.
Nice.
I think I felt the natural inclination to make Alice middle-aged, childless lady, because that's what I am. It felt, I mean, I made the choice without thinking about it, but I do find it interesting that it's a species that's not written about as much. I love the work of Rebecca Solnit and Megan Daum that talk about just bring that up. It's much more common to read about whether it's fiction or personal essay. The story of how a woman can just give and give to her family is a familiar one, and it's a beautiful story. But then what if you didn't do that? Or what do you do after that? What do you do when your kids are grown? What do you do when they don't need you anymore? And so I found that, Rebecca Stone, that I'm gonna butcher this, but she has in her book, The Mother of All Questions, she addresses this issue of what are you doing with your what work do you have to do in the world? And I can't even butcher the paraphrasing it. I can't remember exactly what she's saying, but she's trying to say your love has so much work to do in the world in other ways, and finding that is really your challenge as an individual. So I'm intrigued by that, because whether or not you have kids, you're eventually going to be, if you're lucky, a postmenopausal woman with probably a lot of interesting life experience and energy to give back to something. So discovering that through Alice was interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing that, Eileen, about this idea of like, what work does your love have to do in the world? How might it be different work than what you expected it to be? It feels like in these changing times, that feels like a very important thought to me, is how might your love do something you didn't expect? And I think that, our notion of motherhood might be too limited, and to kind of like broaden it, to think about those possibilities is something of great interest to me. And I think whether it's feminist or not, I know that my impulse is to write into a silence. I've finally noticed this, of like, I see what's interesting me in all these projects I feel compelled to take on is I want to write into a silence that I perceive, whether it's there or not. And I guess there's a lot of fuel for me there. And there's a lot of silences out there. So that feels worth my time.
Great, thank you. We do have a viewer question. What animals are finding their way into your stories next? I'm wondering how you feel about crows. Sy, you've already written about 2 of my 3 favorite animals. So anyone thinking about crows? And if not, what else?
That's my friend Suzanne who asked that question. Hi, Suzanne. We're both a little crow obsessed. She's my neighbor. So yes, I am thinking about crows right now.
Great.
That's my sister who made the murder joke. But there's a great book called How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which does like delve into that crow world. I love that book so much. That book was a great inspiration to me. Yeah. I'm writing about horses a little bit at some point. So my parents, I grew up with horses. So, and I know that Sy loves horses.
Oh yeah. Oh, I do. Gosh. Oh, and I'm writing about turtles. And I can show you. You want to see one of the big characters in my next book? He's so handsome. Oh my God, I've got such a crush on him. Here we go. Here's my guy.
Awesome.
His name is Fire Chief, and he's about my age, and he's single. But he is a reptile.
Give him my number.
But, he's like a 42-pound, probably maybe 60, 70, 80-year-old snapping turtle. And I can feed him by hand. I can pet his head. He'll let me pick him up and carry him anywhere. He was the king of his pond. And then he got hit by a car and his back legs were paralyzed. But now we're doing physical therapy with him. And his legs are coming back.
Wow. That's
Can't
awesome.
wait to read about turtles. That'll be great. Well, what about you, lovely panelists? Do you have questions for each other?
I mean, Florence, do you want to tell us what you're working on? I feel like I sort of heard what you're working on right now, and I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, I want to know.
I wish I could show you the cover, but I don't have my galley here. I have just written a book that's coming out in February, but it is available for pre-order now, and it's called Heartbreak, A Personal and Scientific Journey. And it's partly about recovering from grief and loneliness. in the natural world, but also through other sort of modalities as well. I look, you know, in my last book, The Nature Fix, I sort of talk, I go up to the 3-day effect, sort of what are the benefits of being outside in nearby nature and sort of medium nature and up to 3 days in nature. And for this next book, I actually go out for 30 days on a river trip as kind of a way to deal with my divorce. And so it's more personal than my other books, but it's also a lot of science as well. So thanks for asking.
I love the personal stuff in The Nature Fix with your father. I just love those journals. The idea that he gives you those journals is so moving. I want to see them.
I was so embarrassed by them when I was a teenager, but now, of course, I'm very grateful for them.
That sounds like a great book. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're all gonna order it like immediately.
And it has a great cover. I wish I could show you, but it's actually, the covers. It will be on my website soon.
Oh, great!
I have a trailer coming out too. So I noticed you have a beautiful trailer too for your new book.
Oh, yeah, these wonderful people. They're ministers, actually. Their organization's called SALT, and they did that, and they did one for the Becoming a Good Creature, and they were great to work with. For Becoming a Good Creature, I got to have a tarantula star in that, and Thurber was in it, and there were chickens in it, and there were a bunch of other animals that ended up on the cutting room floor, but we had fun that day.
And there are wonderful animations of the hummingbirds in the hummingbird trailer. And I really wanted to know what these hummingbirds look like, so it was very gratifying.
Thank you. I'll tell them that. That'll make them feel great.
That's really well done. Just a couple more minutes. Anything else?
So in The Nature Fix, Florence, when you were writing about this idea of, you know, theorizing on why nature has this effect, and this idea of unpredictability, or this seemed to be like maybe a critical factor in it. But when you were talking about that, about novelty, like somehow feeding a yen or something, you did mention something about love, about like cereal, or maybe even serial love or something like that. And because I was wise to this idea of the Heartbreak book, I was just kind of curious about this, like this novelty piece that seems like, I don't know, it feels to me like an important piece of the puzzle, this idea of beginner's mind, or, you know, seeing things newly, or seeing new things, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the human mind loves novelty. We are naturally curious people, curious animals. And I think that's one of the things I learned from your books too, is that when you interact with other species, it's just full of surprises every day, right? They do things that are completely unexpected, and it really keeps us kind of in the game with them. And I think it is very, very helpful for healing. So I'm not at all surprised that your narrators end up being full of some hope at the end. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for the messaging, and I'm grateful for your time tonight with us and the lessons that you've shared.
Boy, thank you for being a moderator, and what a treat to spend this hour with these fabulous folks and all of the readers that are out there who joined us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a wonderful discussion. It's a wonderful discussion. I think you just have one more question about bats, actually, from Richard Block, who says, a few nights ago, shortly after dusk, I observed a number of bats darting around and dealing with my mosquito blood. I'm finishing construction on my new house, and I just ordered a large bat house to install on it. Have any of you written about bats? It's been several years since I last saw any bat activity around my house, and I'm thrilled to welcome them back. There was a thing with bats, wasn't there? A disease.
White nose syndrome.
Yeah.
It literally decimated bats. But now there's somewhat of a comeback, because, of course, there's always somebody who survives these epidemics, and those who survived are now breeding back up. So thank God. I know we used to have hundreds of bats in our barn, which we loved, and they would come in the house, which was fantastic. And because in the middle of the night, when you're doing nothing but sleeping, all of a sudden you get to like catch bats, which was fabulous. So, and because the babies are the ones that come in your house because they're just learning to fly and they don't know what to do. But good for you, Rich, that are they little brown bats? They're probably the little brown bats. Anyway, that's great that you're welcoming them back.
So Florence is holding up copies of all of your books. They're beautiful covers, all of you, and they went together so well. They graphically.
Yeah, the colors were pretty great. And
yeah, they were.
Buy these books.
And Heartbreak and the Nature Fix.
Thank you for such a wonderful evening. We do have signed copies of books by all of the authors this evening at oblongbooks.com. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us on Crowdcast tonight and spending their evening with us. And I'd like, on behalf of Oblong Books, to thank our authors and to wish everybody a good night and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. It was lovely to see you all.